Hello. Well, President Donald Trump has had an interview with Time Magazine. He touched on a bunch of subjects, and Jamarl and I are going to see if we can make sense of it. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Jamarl Thomas. So if you're watching it on my channel, Jamarl is running it at the same time. Or if you're running it on his channel, I'm also running it. If you're watching it on either of the channels, we run them together. So make sure if you're subscribed to one but not the other, that you go back and forth so you subscribe to both channels. All right, let's get going. U.S. President Donald Trump has stated that Kiev will never join NATO, suggested that Washington could officially recognize Crimea as Russian, and signaled he expects the Ukraine conflict to be resolved soon. Speaking to Time Magazine to commemorate the first 100 days of his second term, Trump gave an extensive interview covering key topics. Let's get started. Trump stated that Ukraine's desire to join NATO was one of the key reasons for the escalation of the conflict between Moscow and Kiev in 2022. Well, yeah, one of them. And stressed that the topic should never have been raised. Maybe they shouldn't have overthrown the government and stuck a bunch of Nazis in. He emphasized that Ukraine is unlikely to ever actually join the bloc. And the other part of it is, as the Russians have said, Jamarl, there's a difference. What's the difference between Ukraine being in NATO and NATO being in Ukraine? No, they're not a member. Okay. What are you doing? We've got NATO bases all over Ukraine. We got NATO soldiers running all over Ukraine like mice. We're NATO arms in Ukraine. Oh, by the way, we're going to actually exercise Article 5 as though they were a member of NATO. We're going to do things for Ukraine that we've never done for any member of NATO. We're going to give them more money and more weapons than we have given all of NATO combined in the history of NATO. That's what we're going to do. But they're not a member of NATO. What say you about this foolishness about they're never going to join NATO, which he can only speak for 4 years anyway? Jamarl.
In the Bucharest summit in 2008, NATO membership was offered to Ukraine. You can look at the NATO pamphlet during that time frame where they say NATO, they said Ukraine and Georgia, we would love for you to be part of the NATO. That will be fantastic. And we will start the process to do so. And of course, this is when William Burns sent the Net means Net memo, basically saying Putin is flipping out. This is intolerable. This is not necessarily going to take place. And it's not that he said it's not going to take place. He said it's going to create a civil war in Ukraine where Russia is going to have to get involved because it's on their border, something they don't necessarily want to do. They allowed the largest military in Europe. And as you pointed out, weapons, guns, money, intelligence, all of that stuff in Ukraine on the border of Russia, and even directing attacks like in Donetsk when they were, Western media tends to forget about this because they act like Eastern ethnic Russian Ukrainians in the East are not Ukrainians. They are, or at the very least they were. Now they're part of the Russian Federation. But they allowed all this stuff. And they act like Russia shouldn't have any issue with this. Just whether Ukraine is in NATO in earnest or de facto, those are the same things. There's no difference. And whether you are a NATO, let's say military, attacking Russia, or whether you're just giving all of the money, weapons, intelligence, and having Ukraine to do it, I don't think there's a huge difference in those things. Now you can say, well, they don't have nukes like France and the UK. Okay. But that's not, that difference is very, that's a shallow difference between those things. And so, yeah, he's right that there was an issue in regards to Russia taking issue with it. That is part of the reason that they're fighting this war. But, the huge military on their border, the attacking ethnic Russian Ukrainians and killing 14,000 of them, those are also major issues of what was taking place. Not to mention, we don't give Russia security guarantees. They don't deserve security guarantees. This stuff was like all of these things were provocative. Knocking over the government of Ukraine in 2014, that's provocative. They're acting like no issue. We don't understand why Russia is flipping out. We don't understand why they're invading. It's like they're out of their minds.
Well, there's a couple other things here that's interesting too that you have to take into account. Number one, and that is, he says Ukraine's desire to join NATO. There were back in the early to mid 2000s, there were polls done, and 20% or less at one point, I think one was 12% of Ukrainians wanted to join NATO.
Right.
Most Ukrainians, like 80% of the population doesn't want to join NATO. So was it Ukraine's desire to join NATO that caused the conflict? What happened? The United States then took over NATO. Victoria Nuland admitted to spending $5 billion in this poor country, $5 billion. They did propaganda in there. They did these things where they taught people how to go online and do online activism. In other words, online anti-Russia stuff and trying to join NATO, right?
Right.
So it wasn't Ukraine's desire. The U.S. created a desire in Ukraine where there was none, and then said they had a desire. What is this? Donald Trump's rhetoric is an attempt to blame Ukraine, to say, hey, we were just outside here, mind our own business. We were just chilling. And Ukraine decided to join NATO, and this big war started, and we got caught up in the middle of it. It takes away the malice. You know what I mean? That the United States surrounded, like, their desire to join NATO. Well, what about all the bases we built? And what about the lie we told Russia when we said we'd never move an inch to the east and we surrounded them with bases? What about the 2019 document that the Pentagon had written that was how to unbalance and overextend Russia? And in that document, they talked about how they could use Ukraine to do that. And he even armed Ukraine. So you skip everything and just like, well, it just so happened they wanted to join the Ukraine and Russia got pissed off about it. And then, I understand that. And then next thing you know, they were fighting it out. We're just trying to clean up this mess. This was a decades-long malicious act to destroy Russia, which multiple times we literally put in writing that we were going to use Ukraine to take out Russia. And now it becomes, I don't know. Probably shouldn't have happened, but you know what I mean? It's a denial of the maliciousness of the empire. That we're not an empire. We're not trying to overthrow governments, including Russia. We're not doing terrible things. We're not drawing people into wars. We're not arming. No, none of that. We're just kind of wandering around, minding our own business. And every now and then we get drawn into a conflict on Russia's border or China's border in Taiwan, incidentally, because we happen to be in the area. And we're just trying to straighten this thing out. It's pretty sickening overall. What Donald Trump's trying to do, his so-called enemies, if he really was opposed to all of these neocons, why don't he expose them? Why don't he just say, let's be honest about it, the neocons did this, and I'm not about that life. But he ain't doing that.
No, he's not. Nor is he, pulling weapons, still passing sanctions, still doing that stuff. Trump could have walked in the beginning. He could have just, like Steve Bannon, walked the F away, call it a day. Say, all right, this is Joe Biden's war. I'm calling it a day, calling it quits. I don't believe in this war. I'm done. He didn't do that. He continued with this kind of war effort. They were still firing missiles. They were still blowing stuff up. So there's this myth that Donald Trump doesn't believe in the neocons. He surrounded himself with neocons, right? I mean, he made the choice of the people who he chose in his cabinet and the people he surrounded himself with. Every random blue moon, he gets Vance, somebody who, seems to be more hesitant, more restrained in regards to the war. But Vance still lumped in. It's like, all right, if you want to blow up a house in order to get one guy, fair enough. Blowing up an apartment building, that's fine. That's okay. I'll if you guys want to do that, I'll lump it. I guess I'm saying he is projecting something during the campaign that is not entirely true. And the truth of the matter is, this is his war. I mean, how could it not be? He had the choice to leave it. He didn't. He had the choice to stop firing missiles into Russia. He didn't. So at this point, at some point, he has to own it, right? When is that point? 100 days? Was 100 days enough time? He said 24 hours. He might have said it was in jest. Whatever. He said it.
And here's the other thing. He recently renewed the sanctions for a year.
Yes, he did.
against Russia. And there are a number of things that, if we're honest about it, the Treasury sanctions like Sputnik and RT, they don't even go through it. He could just wave his hand and say, all those Treasury sanctions, he's already done some of it. The Treasury sanctions where they were saying they were looking to see which oligarchs were still able to move their money, he just said, we're going to stop doing that. He could just say all Treasury sanctions against Russia, SWIFT, all that kind of stuff, forget all that stuff, because that's through the Treasury. He can just say it. It's not through the Congress. So he has an opportunity. And as I've said several times today, Trump could just, I mean, he's negotiating with the Russian diplomats. Why doesn't he just say, you know what, effective tomorrow, the flights between Russia and the US will regain, they're no longer prohibited, and all of those properties that we took from the Russians, they can have all their properties back. He doesn't need Congress to do that. So he's talking a good game, saying he wants to do this and that, saying he's making a move, but I'm not seeing the actions commensurate with, if I'm the Russians, I'm like, well, you sound good, buddy, but show me the money. Show me one thing that you're going to do that'll make the neocons mad. He's going to have to do something that the neocons will be mad about. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, he's fence-sitting. I mean, he has to make a choice at some point, right? I mean, it's one thing to say something. It's another thing, do it. I will give him credit that he has moved rhetorically further than most presidents. I mean, even the recognition of the Crimea thing is rather big from a U.S. context. But, you know, if you're Russia, do you really care? I mean, and I say that to say they have lined up sanctions with this notion of we are going to economically and strategically defeat Russia on the battlefield and in economics. They openly said it. That is what the position of the U.S. And I don't care whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, it is the United States that was effectively doing it. It is the United States that was killing Russians. Yeah, they might have been using Ukraine as the hand to do it, but they were using intelligence. It was our missiles, weapons, etc. So, you know, if you're the Russians, why do you care at a certain point? You've heard Europe complain and come up with all of this rhetoric and everything else. You've heard the U.S. complain and come up with all of this rhetoric. Truth be told, Crimea has been in the pocket of Russia. Mind you, they voted to leave to the tune of like 90-something%. And if you look at the other regions, they voted to leave. It's no wonder why they voted to leave, because they were being slaughtered by the Ukrainian government, the coup government that effectively took over the actual government of Ukraine. And then he called it a democracy. He got rid of all the opposition parties, all of the opposition media. They were attacking the church, attacking the Russian language, but they're like, this is democracy. And Putin just, you know, wanted to take over all of Europe. And he wanted to take over all of Ukraine. If you are the Russians and you hear that nonsense for years, do you care what they think about you, or for that matter, what they think about regions that you have delineated as being part of the Russian Federation? I don't think you do.
No.
I don't
Yeah,
think
and
you
it's and the thing is this too. Okay, show me something material, right?
Right.
Okay. Oh, we'll recognize that. Well, you're saying that, but I believe you recognize it when you recognize it. They keep saying things they may do. Yes, we need to redo flights between the U.S. I'll believe them when I see them. Oh, we need to give them their property back and all this. I'll believe it when I see it. You know what I mean? I've said this. I once was when I used to do sales, we had a sales manager. And when you go in, hey, how did your sales visit, Garland, go? Go, Garland. You know what he wanted? The end result. Did you get the sale? No. Is there anything we can do? Why didn't you get the sale? Well, the customer said it was 15,000 install and he couldn't go over 12.5. He said, where's his phone number? I'll get him I'll make the deal. Only thing he wanted to know is, did you get the deal or not? Yeah. And if not, why didn't you get the deal? And let me try to get the deal, right? Okay. So in the end, yeah, I may buy the product from you, Jamarl. Okay. I may think about doing this if we can do this or that. Bottom line, did you get the sale or didn't you get the sale? At this point, you look at Trump and it's like, yeah, we may recognize Crimea. We may do this. We could go and we could do all kind of deals together and all that, until you show me one material, actual thing that you, so far, if you look at Trump, Mr. Dealmaker, right? He's talked about that he can get a deal, and we've talked to the Chinese. The Chinese like, we didn't talk to him. What the hell are you talking about?
He's just
Yeah,
making it
I'm
up.
going to force the Iranians into the deal. The Iranians are, we ain't going to do what you don't want us to do. If you're going to attack us, you're going to have to attack us. But we only going but so far, buddy.
Right.
Okay, well, I'll attack you then. All right, well, I guess you won't attack us, right? So a bluster and bluff and threats and how the deals he's going to get. But so far, he's been threatening to attack everybody. He ain't attacking nobody. I don't believe he's attacking anybody, to be quite frank. I'm glad of that, but he does. That's one of his tactics. He's been telling us all the deals he's going to get. He's telling the other people what he's going to do for them and how he's going to work. But so far, to be honest, all we've got from Donald Trump is censorship, the opposite of what he said he was going to do. Raising taxes beyond any belief, the opposite of what he said he was going to do. The only material things that I've seen from Donald Trump are the opposite of what he said of what he ran on.
Yeah, throwing people out the country that by court order are supposed to be in the country, and not just throwing people out the country, throwing people into foreign countries. That is mind-blowing. That unheard of. The notion that you would take somebody that is supposed to be in the U.S. by court order and delineate them, like define them as a terrorist. And once you define them as a terrorist, chuck them into El Salvador by accident, meaning you admit this was a mistake. And then the judge said, bring them back. And he's like, I don't have the ability to do that, despite the fact you brought back other people. That is astonishing. That is unheard of. And then to even go after students and kick them out because you don't like what they're criticizing, a foreign government, that is radically anti-American. Meaning the American first president is taking anti-American activities. Free speech, the First Amendment, is the First Amendment for a reason. The notion that you are attacking free speech, you're attacking universities at the behest of a foreign government, there's nothing more anti-American. Nothing more anti-American.
Well, how about this, too? Okay, we're going to send these people to Ecuador, even though I wouldn't agree with it. I would still disagree with it because I believe in, that a person has a right to due process. But let's just say that guy had grabbed some poor little old lady and beat her to death and strangled her with his bare hands. And you said, I'm sending him to El Salvador. I would disagree with it, certainly. But less people would disagree. They'd be like, hey, that guy beat some poor little old woman to death and whatever he gets is good enough. I wouldn't agree. But other people, you might look at it and say, well, he's not a good dude, but I don't want that to happen. You could make a due process argument. But when it's for free speech, when it's for what they said, and you specifically came in and said the era of censorship is over just before you attacked Yemen. I forgot that one. We might as well throw that one in there. You've attacked a country, started basically a war and bombing and killing civilians, something else you said. So, a lot of bluster. All right. Next, promise to end the Ukraine conflict. In this, he says, Trump was asked to clarify his statements. Well, I already knew this. He says he was speaking figuratively, that this was an exaggeration. He suggested he's making good progress. We're getting very close to a deal, Trump said. No, they're not getting close to a deal. He hasn't. One of the things, if me and you are going to get on it, like if you're negotiating with people, right? Sometimes people will say, give me something. For instance, hostage negotiation, right? They got 20 hostages and you're negotiating with them. And, I want this. But I said, look, I trust you. You trust. I'll tell you what, for good, just to show we trust each other, I'll do this. I'll send in some food and water. And you give me 2 hostages. You're trying to negotiate. You're the hostage negotiator. You're doing anything you can to get a hostage out, right? You give me 2 hostages in good faith. I'll send you. You said, we need water. We haven't had food and water in 2 hours. We'll send your food and water. Give me 2 hostages. You got 2 children in there, one woman, and a pregnant woman and a child. Just send those. You don't need them anyway. They're pregnant woman and a child. They're too much trouble. Send those out, right? But why? You always talk good faith. Hey, show good faith. I'll show good faith, right? Okay. Trump needs to show good faith. We're getting close to a deal. What has he done with them other than just saying, I hear you, I listen to you, this is wrong? He has done nothing to show good faith at this point. Nothing. They've done, look, you can at least say Putin said, I'll tell you what, we'll go along and we won't fire at their infrastructure. We'll do a 24-hour or 30-hour truce. He's done some things that you could say he made a move to show good faith. What has Trump done if he wants this thing done so bad to show good faith? I haven't seen any. Not even a gesture of good faith.
Yeah, I haven't seen any. I mean, you would think that he would something. something material, something tangible. I mean, there's been like the behind the scenes thing where he was like, okay, we're not going to enforce the sanctions or something like that. But that stuff was minor. That was like around the edges. A lot of this stuff has just been rhetoric without necessarily anything material, putting on, where it's almost as if he doesn't want to take a move that he would get some level of blowback for taking the move, like a material move, like instead of sitting on the fence and dithering, to actually do something. And to your point, Russia has said, okay, well, we'll take the 24-hour ceasefire.
The Easter Trilogy,
in regards to energy infrastructure. And Ukraine violated it immediately, right?
Of course.
And he didn't even say, hey, stop violating the deal. He didn't even do that. And so even with the Easter truce thing, and then Zelensky was like, I don't want to do it. Then they were pushing him, like, hey, I think you need to do it. They violated that. So every deal that was put up, they violated. And so what is the incentive for Russia to accept the deal with somebody that can't acknowledge violations of the deals? Whether it was with Hamas, the deal that was made with Israel that was supposed to be a ceasefire. Part of the reason that Yemen is firing into the Red Sea now is because of Israel and basically the murder of all of these people. Okay, well, Trump didn't say a word about it being violated. He doesn't seem to be a trustworthy actor. In fact, I go further. This notion of we must have this done in a few days, and then a little bit later, a couple of weeks. Okay, which one is it? Or with the Iran thing, initially you get Wickoff coming out saying, 3.6% enrichment. And then Wickoff gets attacked, backs away from that position effectively. Well, we need like the Libyan option. We need all of it gone, which is obviously going to be a red line because Iran said there was going to be a red line from jump. Meaning he cannot hold the thread in regards to his thinking on stuff. Oh, I'm talking to China on the phone. No, you're not. No, you're not. You just made that up. And over again, like getting into a turf war that you can't get yourself out of. And you try to get help from other countries and they start to work with China. Or they tell you, we're not changing our relationship with China for you. Like this is stuff he got into. He created these 1-0 gamesmanship, this zero-sum games,
right,
or the zero-sum contests, where either you win or you lose. And the reality of it is, as you say, the art of the deal maker has not been able to make a deal. He's been failing across the board, whether it's with Iran, whether it's with China, or for that matter, whether it's with getting a deal in Russia. And by the way, I don't believe he's going to get a deal. I could be wrong, but the reality of it is Russia has red lines. And I don't know how Putin violates those red lines. Maybe with the territories, you could say, okay, well, these territories, this area is, you might be able to fudge that. It's hard to fudge the no NATO thing. It is hard to fudge the denazification thing, especially since the Banderites are still in power, which means you're still in a. Did you hear Klitschko's clip where Klitschko came out and said, "This you may have to give up territory for a temporary truce"?
Yeah,
dude, it's not temporary. Like that's not the objective. And if it is the objective, they're just going to keep going. So I don't know.
Well, here's the thing about it is there's a recognition, there's an old term, and I think it's called the zealousness of the convert, right? Where somebody converts somebody to their way of thinking, and then the person is more zealous about that way of thinking than the person that converted them in the first place, right? So oh boy, we hate Russia. We have to make sure that the Ukrainians absolutely despise Russia. Well, you were successful. You were very successful. Now you say to the Ukrainians, look, that worked while it worked, but we're kind of tired of that. So y'all, all that hate and stuff, Russian stuff, that's over. We're now going to make a deal and walk away. And the Ukrainians say, you don't understand. You did a good job of convincing us to hate the Russians. You did so good that we really do hate them. We ain't faking. And we're not just going to walk away from that. We'll stand here and fight. Now we are crazy Nazi zealots, and we'll fight to the last. Here's the thing about it. The Ukrainians leadership is ready to fight to the last Ukrainian.
Right.
It's like during the end of Germany, when Hitler was arming children and literally said, the women, the children, every last person in Germany should fight the Russians and the, and the Allies. And if every last German dies, then they deserve it because they didn't try hard enough. Ready to just say, we'll all die. Every one of y'all should die fighting for me. And if you don't, then you weren't good enough. You didn't earn it. You didn't deserve it, right? And it's the same thing. The Western powers created the Third Reich to take out Russia. If you look historically, they armed them, they did everything. They created this Third Reich military machine to go fight Russia. And then it got out of hand and they couldn't control it because Nazis aren't like much really, they're not really, what's the word? They're not trainable. You know what I mean? They can't be domesticated. Once you get a Nazi, it's like owning a rattlesnake. You're not going to pet them. They're always going to bite the hand that feeds them. That's their nature. There's certain pets that people have, right? That it's not like maybe you get a puppy or something. After a while, he likes you. You rub him, he wags his tail. If you have a pet, black mamba, it's not like at some point that black mamba is going to go, oh, that's the guy that always brings me rats. Hey, I won't bite you. No. If there's an arm near, he's grabbing it. It's his nature. That's what he does. You're never his friend. You're always a threat, and you're there to be bitten. But that's what happens when you create a Nazi regime. They did it with them. Now they've created another Nazi regime. Right now, if you look at what these Banderites have said, they said, we want to be the worldwide leader of the white race. That includes you, America. That means in their twisted little minds, one of these days they gain full power, and that includes the United States, because at that point, then they overthrow the United States, and that becomes part of Ukraine also. In their minds, that's who they are. So now that you try to yank the reins on them, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Oh, so you're one of them too. They're going to fight you. They hate you. They never liked you in the first place. You were a means to an end. And now he's trying to pull the reins on these people. It's not going to happen. And that's the dilemma. And might I add, if we go back to your favorite girls, the Kaja Kallases and the Baerbachs and the Nazi princesses, they're the same people. They're fascists. They're Nazis. And they're not going to sit around and think, well, gee, we don't have the weapons to defeat Russia, so we better not fight them. They don't get that far. They stop at, we hate Russia. We must fight Russia. We must stop them. They're evil. That's as far as they can get. There's no computing power there to reason these things out. And that's what you created, that the U.S. empire, and now that's a mess that you got you got the Third Reich on your hands, the 3.5 Reich on your hands, and I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to control it. And you're right, but we're all right. The only thing he could do was walk away. And here's the thing about the Europeans: if you walk away from the Europeans leadership, they're so crazy. If they don't fight the Russians, they'll end up at war with each other. That's what they always do.
What is a scratch a German, find a Nazi? Scratch a German, find a Nazi. I mean, in Annalena Baerbock, where she's talking about her family that were Nazis, like, that's just wild, right? That's wild to me. Like, Europe would be speaking German today if it wasn't for the Red Army, the immortal Red Army, right? The Great Patriotic War. It is hard to get across what they went through. Like, oh God, man, some of those books and stuff that they went through. One of Beaver's book, he makes the point of saying how what took place on the East, the West could not fathom, because it wasn't a war. In essence, it was a war of extermination. It wasn't like, and he made this point of saying how Western soldiers would fight up to a certain point, and they're like, okay, I did my duty of what I was supposed to do. Hands up, I'm done. And that wasn't really an opportunity on the Eastern Front. It was a fight to the death, because it was a war of extermination. There is this badass speech. I am not idolizing Stalin. I'm not doing that. One of the speeches during the war, though, God, he made this speech where he said, if you want a war of extermination, then the war of extermination you will get. I have never heard a speech where the guys like literally saying stuff like that. But again, that was what they were doing, right? They were killing each other to death. What's like 80-something% of the Germans that died on the Eastern Front, fighting the Russians or fighting the Soviet Union. And for them not to acknowledge that is sad and pathetic. They would be speaking German. Kalis, whatever the hell her name is, she would be speaking German right now. That entire map of Europe turned to German, with the exception of like the Soviet Union, even large parts of the Soviet Union, up to the point where they pushed them back. And for them not to acknowledge that for a war that, yeah, they started. I know that they're trying to go, well, Russia invaded. Yes, Russia invaded. But look at what you were doing. You overthrew the government of Ukraine. What did you think was going to happen when you did that? That is a provocative act, right? If somebody overthrew the government of Mexico, that would be pretty provocative, especially if they were enemies of ours and they called it, a revolution of dignity when they overthrew the government in a coup. They ignore that. They have this weird stab in the back myth type scenario that they come up with in order to justify all of these weapons and everything else, jingoism into their communities, into their thing, just racist hatred that they've seeded into Europe with lies. It's astonishing the way that they've left out so much of what was taking place and why this war started. Fair enough. Either way, you lost. Now the catch becomes, do you accept that loss or do you keep digging the ditch? And it seems like Zelensky and Europe are deciding to dig the ditch. Arestovich has a great quote on one of his things. That was Zelensky's spinmeister. That was his propaganda minister who effectively left and became opposition figure, realizing, oh my God, all of these people are dying. It's our fault that we're doing this. And they said, why should we give up 4 territories? And he said, in 6 months, it's going to be 6. In a year, it's going to be 8. That's why. Basically, the deal that Trump has given Zelensky, he should get on his knees and write it in blood, sign it in blood. Because the only other thing that he's going to get is death. He's going to have people shot in the face, and those people are going to continue to die. And the Russians are going to keep moving westward, ever so westward, ever so westward. And then they're going to say, hey, would you guys like to be part of the Russian Federation? Let's have a poll. And they're going to say yes. And he's going to say, okay, now we have 6 regions. Now we have 8 regions. It's going to be that. And if they keep messing around, it's going to be Kiev. It's going to be Kiev. It has to be Kiev. Because if you're talking about denazification, how do you do that? They've been denazifying the country by shooting them in the face already, right? Especially the Banderites and the most radical versions of these people. But the reality of it is, if they keep going, I mean, the offensive that they're effectively doing is going to get them very close to Kiev. And I remember Mark pointing out that was the pathway to Kiev. Whether they go after Kiev or not, who knows? But if you're trying to denazify, and if you're trying to, let's say, get rid of the government that's in, that's where you go. If he keeps messing around, because in one last point, the Russians, the question becomes, how red are those lines? Now, Putin has been saying the red line stuff for a very long time in regards to what they need in order to end the conflict. And that is not where Trump is up to this point. We haven't necessarily seen all of the deal. If the deal includes the 4 territories plus the Crimea, if it includes no NATO for Ukraine, if it includes getting rid of Zelensky, if it includes, I forget the other, if it's that, then maybe you have a deal. But can a US president really do that? And so it's almost like the Russians are negotiating, knowing full well that the Europeans are never going to accept it, and knowing that that goofball Zelensky doesn't have sense enough to accept it. And so they're like, hey, we'll be magnanimous. We'll talk to you about this. We'll talk to you about that. Yeah, let's talk. We can have this conversation. All the while killing Ukrainians on the battlefield. And so they look reasonable in what they're willing to, at the very least, talk, with the Europeans looking like they're out of their minds. What on earth do they believe that is going to happen that didn't happen over the last 3 years, especially now that the U.S. is saying, we're done? It's like, it's a level of delusion that they're effectively running with. It's bizarre.
It really is. And we are at a place where 100 days in, Trump started off like a ball of fire. So now he's doing his 100-day interview, but he started off like a ball of fire. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. He's firing all of these people, all of these things. And he's very much, this is a very much an ADD, him and Musk, ADD, administration, where a person starts one job and they get 20% in of it, and they just get bored of that and drop it, and they start another one, 20% in that, and then they end up with 10 different things, and every one of them is started, and 20% of them is done, none of them's finished.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it looks like. And now old Doge boy, he comes in, he's firing all of these people under the, and see, this is what burns me up because it was so predictable, under the claim that we've got to fire a bunch of, soccer moms that work for the Department of Agriculture so that we can save money for the government.
Yeah.
And what do? They fire all of these people. They screw it up. It is bad. I know people who are in the government, and it is screwed up bad. So bad in so many ways. But they fire all these people, don't know what they're doing. And then they increase the Pentagon budget by more, far more than they saved by firing a bunch of people. So what do you say? We're going to take plain old everyday working class people that are working for the government and fire them. And we're going to take that money and give it to the military industrial complex. So what have you done? Oh, we've got to trim the fat off the government. Really? So you're going to trim the so-called fat off the government. And what are you going to do with the fat off the government that you trim? Give it right to the war machine. And then it comes out that old Elon Musk now, so Trump says he wants to do a golden dome, just like Israel's whatever dome, right? Iron Dome. We're going to do a golden dome, right? Well, first of all, the Iron Dome doesn't work for Israel. The Iranians penetrated at will, to be quite frank. It's absurd. But, and now we find out that Elon Musk is at the top. Now, first of all, Elon Musk, what the hell does he know about air defense? But he's at the top for that. Right. So now he's going to fire a bunch of people. He's going to take the money that he fired with him, triple it, quadruple it, give it to the military industrial complex, and then fill his own stinking filthy pockets that are already full. And you just look at it and I'm like, this kind of looks like a big scam to me. Like a billionaire came in and said, hey, this money's going to working class people. We can't have that. I got to put it in my own pockets. So you come in, raise the deficit. We've got to make all these moves because we got to save money. And and the Republican budget raises the deficit by $20 trillion.
Yep.
And
right
you put the biggest tax cut. Oh, it's hard. People can't afford the eggs. We're going to fix that. Yeah, you fixed it. And now it's not that they just can't afford eggs. They ain't going to be able to afford anything. They won't be able to afford to turn the stove on so they could cook the eggs if they could afford the eggs. It's absurd.
Yes, it's worse than that, I would argue. I mean, Elon Musk, let's be generous. I don't think it's this much, but let's say he saved $500 billion. Hell, let's say he saved $1 trillion. As you pointed out, Trump is increasing the military budget to $1 trillion. We're not in any wars. And yet, $1 trillion. The Republicans are going in to put tax cuts, meaning enshrining his current tax cuts, and then putting $20 trillion on the deficit to give themselves tax cuts. That's astonishing. And then to make it even worse, the tariffs for this trade war that he created, who's paying that? We are. And so you have situations where items are not going to be on store shelves. If you can afford those items, because all of these items are now going to go up in value or cost because of the tariffs that Donald Trump has basically put on the world. And at the same token, because of the war and because of the volatility of the stock market, the dollar has been crashing. I think it's lost like 10% of its value. You had a situation where like bond yields, all of these things have just been chaos. The stock market was dropping like 1,000 points a day, back to back to back. You've lost trillions of dollars of wealth, right like that, off the top, just bam. And so what ended up or started off as a relatively decent economy where it was going to make, let's say, 1 or 2%, is going to be a recession. And it's going to be a recession simultaneously with your dollar paying or buying less and with the items being more expensive. All of it, none of it had to happen. While simultaneously, Trump has given himself a tax cut. Elon Musk, tax cut. His cronies, tax cuts. $20 trillion on the debt. It's already at $36 trillion, by the way. So we're talking about like a $56 trillion deficit that Trump is creating. And by the way, not saving any money. They're still putting like $2 trillion a year on the deficit. That was the entire point of Doge. So they fired all of these the richest man in the world, firing middle class and poor people that works for the government to save nothing. To save nothing. It's disgusting. That's what, and by the way, he is an albatross.
Yes,
I
he is.
call that like nobody's business. I said he's going to be an albatross around Trump's neck. He is deeply unpopular. Tesla stock plummeted, just fell off a cliff. And that just fell off a cliff. If you remember, he put all of their money into that election in Wisconsin in order to try to get his judge into office. And what happened? She lost by double digits because it became a referendum on Elon Musk himself, an albatross. People don't like the richest man on the planet. Billionaires in the old days, if you remember, used to work behind the scenes.
Yep.
Like they used to move stuff behind the scenes. I'm going to give this guy money. I'm going to give that guy money. I'm going to give this guy money in order to accomplish my objectives behind the scenes. And somewhere along the way, they got this idea that, hey, I should be in front of the crowd. They'll like me. Bloomberg got the message when he got on the debate stage and they ate him alive on that debate stage. He spent, $1 billion in a primary to lose miserably. And people took that money. They said, thank you for that money, knowing full well he had no chance. I'm pointing out that it's a weird reality bubble that these guys are in to think that the public will love me. Oh, they would think I'm awesome. No, they don't. You're a horrible you're a horrible person. You are firing people for no reason under the guise of waste, fraud, and abuse. It's nonsense. You have Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, these offices that deal with the poorest of this country, the elderly, the sick, and he is destroying all of those institutions under this guise of waste, fraud, and abuse. Republican Party is trying to take $800 billion out of Medicaid under waste, fraud, and abuse. There's not that much waste, fraud, and abuse. They're doing it in order to get themselves tax cuts, to jimmy the math, to make it look like it is not as bad as it actually is. It is disgusting. Full stop, disgusting. That's why they hate him, as they should.
100 days in. And here's the thing. Trump ran on a bunch of stuff. That some of it I thought was good. Some of the things that he said, I said, hey, man, the man saying he wants peace, that's a good thing. And the man saying this, he ran on, oh, we don't want censorship. But, I said often, but I'm going to go with Trump is I'll go by what he does, not what he says. I've been saying that from the very beginning. He says this. Well, let's see the actions because he is Trump and he runs his mouth a lot. But, and we both said the same thing. Look, if he does something good, I'll say that was good. If he does something bad, I'll say that was bad. The Democrats were the worst. I hated the Democrats. Hey, he's coming in. He's got Tulsi and RFK Jr. He's got a little bit of a team of rivals thing going on. Let's see. Maybe this can work out. Maybe it'll be okay. So I feel like people like you and I, who said, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, have every right in the world to criticize him because we didn't come in here. We never believed Russiagate. We said that's a fraud. We said Kamala is probably the worst candidate that I've ever seen in my life. And Joe Biden was a mentally broken zombie. All these stuff are true. Zombie. Yeah, exactly. Dead man walking. But when Trump came in, we're like, okay, show me the money, brother. Let's see what you're going to do. And he comes out here. And here's the thing is too, he ends up being just another Zionist puppet.
Yeah.
He ends up talking how strong he is. And when it comes to Israel, there's an appearance that he's just another Zionist puppet, that you can't be a MAGA person, so-called Make America Great Again, if you're like, well, you know what? You can talk about America all you want to. You can say, I hate the Constitution. I hate America. I hate Trump, which you should be able to. But if you say it about Israel, you're getting thrown in a camp. You're getting beaten up, dragged away, thrown out of college, money taken from your college. It's like a guard dog, like Malcolm X talked about a guard dog. A guard dog is not trained to protect himself. If a guard dog's walking down the road, you kick him, pow, the dog, he'll run away, right? But if you go after his master, then you'll see his teeth. Then he's ready to fight because he's not trained to protect himself. He's trained to protect his master. That's the way Trump looks with Israel. You know what I mean? Yeah, you can talk about Trump. You're a jerk. Okay. America sucks. Whatever. I don't like Israel. Oh, well, buddy, you stepped over the line now. You can talk about me. You can stomp on me, spit on me, and urinate on me. You can come to the White House and poop in the floor. I don't care. But if you say one word about Israel, you're going to El Salvador and you're never coming back. And might I add, this article, Mr. Tough Guy, yes, sir, we're standing up. The Russians will have to do what we say. Damn them Iranians. If they don't, we'll bomb them to pieces. And the whole world will have to listen to us when we tell them we're getting tariffs. And the judge says, Hey, could you bring those guys back from El Salvador? How can we stand up to the mighty empire of El Salvador? They're far too powerful. That's the only country that totally dominates him is El Salvador. They're so powerful that he can't compel them to send somebody back, according to him, to what he's told the court. It's clownish.
Well, the court. Did you read the thing for the appeal court that was dealing with that case? They excoriated him, effectively saying, the judge said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing, I tried to give the administration benefit of the doubt, and they were shocked at the level of mendacity that was coming out of the Trump administration on that issue. Like they were blown away that an administration would behave this way, effectively saying you're creating a crisis in regard to the judge. Like you're diminishing us by what you're telling us. Like you're diminishing this process. Like they excoriated the administration on that. The notion that you're saying we threw somebody accidentally, quote unquote, in a prison, and for whatever reason we can't get them out. Oh, by the way, in a foreign country. The American public wouldn't present it with that case. The majority says bring him back 2-1. The majority. They 50-something% says this is outrageous. How are you deporting somebody to a foreign country? And I think it was like 28% were wackos and lunatics and just horrible people. Like it is deeply un-American. Like, and I know it's hard to explain. Well, it's not hard to explain. These people are caught in cults, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. And you would have liberals who would follow their master, follow the party line, and they're almost like robots. I used to know what a Democrat would say just based on what Rachel Maddow said. They're programmed. Republicans are acting the exact same way. And so it's like, hey, you realize due process is a thing, right? In the old days, they had kings. The reason that many of our laws are set up the way they are, because we didn't like what kings were doing by throwing people in prison on a whim. You have Trump doing the exact same thing, and their response is, yeah, but he probably deserved it. Okay, where are you getting that from? The due process matters. It should matter to people beyond their political leanings, right? It should be something above your politics, where you say, America matters more. I'm an American. Free speech is an element of me being an American. Due process is an element of me being an American. These are things that we should prize, and we should prize for the very specific reason that if it ever happens to you, you would want the same process to take place. That it's not just at the whim of a king or a rogue president in the way that he's acting. Look, I am not Trump deranged on this. If Trump does something good, I would say so. If he makes a deal, good job, right? Even when he was killed at TPP, good job. Like I don't have any feelings in the sense of a negative sentiment that goes beyond what he's doing. It's a reality-based sentiment. It's you're starting a tariff war. What the hell is wrong with you? You're increasing the prices on my family, on my mom, on my, whatnot. What's wrong with you? You're destroying all of these institutions like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid that people in this country need. Like if you call Social Security today, they would say, due to staff shortages, we have to extend the time frame to which you can meet somebody by like 6 months, 4 months, etc. That's outrageous if you're ill and you need Social Security and you need to get out of work. And instead of you being able to get out of work, you have to wait for months. Like,
and might I add, if you understand Social Security, if somebody applies for Social Security disability, which means they can't work anywhere, let's say they go blind, their legs get cut off, you can't work anywhere, you apply for disability. Generally, I don't care how bad it is, what usually happens is a person applies, about 3 months they deny it, you apply again, then you get a hearing. It takes about a year. They always deny the first couple, then you get a lawyer, which you don't have to pay for. But bottom line, after about a year, you get a hearing, then they give you the granted to you back to the day that you first asked. So that's a pain in the neck. But now it becomes a year and a half. And might I add, what happens if during that period, now you get a hearing? Well, guess what? If it took a year to get a hearing before they fired everybody, It might take 2 years. So bottom line is, by the time you get it, you'll been dead for 4 years.
Yeah.
In other words, if you need it because you can't work anymore, or you need some money to help because you've gone blind and you have a right to Social Security, then you can't wait 3 years for it.
They
But
destroyed the
now,
process.
yeah, you're for the most needy. And what are you going to do with that money again? Oh, that's right. You're increasing the Pentagon budget by $130 billion, and you're going to so-called build a golden dome and send people to Mars and all this other crap. It's a sad. Right now, Trump is just an absolute 100 days disaster.
Yeah.
You know, maybe, hopefully, we got a less chance to get nuked with Ukraine. So that's a good thing. That, you know, I mean, we got to say, if Biden was in there, we're probably fried. So at least that. But you promised a lot more, and it's one thing not to deliver. That's a person that tries and can't. It's another thing to deliver the opposite of what you promised, because that shows bad faith. I got to get ready to run, by the way. So we made it 50 minutes. Well, hey, 50 minutes, that's a pretty good amount of time. Jamarl, tell everybody where they can find you online and what have you.
Jamarl Thomas Morning Show, 7 a.m., 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. Check me out. Best damn morning show that you can find on the web. Do news, politics, domestic, international.
All right. And I'm on, yeah, everybody knows my channel, Garland Nixon. Don't forget, there's a little join button. You can join and become a member. Also, we got follow me on Rockfin, follow me on Rumble. And if you can, whether it's buy me a coffee or Patreon, then if you can PayPal, whatever, it's all going across the bottom. And also, if you look across the bottom, I have a P.O. box now. So if somebody wants to send me letter, you know, I've had people say, hey, I'd like to send you a letter or send you some info or whatever. Guess what? I got a P.O. box. You can send me something now. It's right across the bottom, P.O. Box 32 or whatever, Glen Burnie, Maryland. So make sure that you are subscribed to both of our channels. If you can afford to join. Also, share these shows on all your social media platforms. We're out. All right.